One, two, three. Yes. Testing, testing. Let me check my beautiful chat. We are live. Let's see if you can hear me and our audio is working today. Things seem to be going a little smoother today than they were last week, but that was Root Boy Slim. And I have got my Studio 54 outfit on, ready to talk about the early days of Steely Dan with Gary Katz. I am super excited to be able to bring him on to the show. As you have noticed the past few weeks, we've been taking deep dives into the early Steely Dan band, and it's been a lot of fun. We had, Skunk, Baxter, we had Steve Barry, we had Denny Diash. Oh my God, I asked him how to say his last name 500 times. And now we have Gary. So without further ado, let's bring him on. And welcome to the show, Gary Katz! Yay!
Hi, Sims.
Gary, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, it should be fun.
Yeah, and I want to ask my chat, since we are live, Boogie Till You Puke, truly epic. How can everybody hear Gary all right? Yes. Oh, okay. So we have got some love for Root Boy Slim right now in the chat, Gary.
We do.
Yeah, let's talk about...
We always have love for Root.
I mean, there are so many other things you worked on besides Steely Dan, just like my dad. And Root Boy Slim was one of them.
My favorite other one.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So Dad engineered it and you produced it. How was that working on Root Boy Slim? And the Sex Change Band, right? I forgot the last part.
With the Rootettes.
Rootettes, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Your dad and I were at the village one night, and Donald came by, and when he left a cassette on the console for me to listen to. And a few hours later, I went home. I was going home. I put the cassette in the car, and it was what you just heard. And I couldn't imagine what Fagan was thinking. I thought he was playing me new things of his, and I couldn't imagine how he got himself to sound like that. So I called him, and he told me a friend of his in Washington had sent him this tape, and we just loved it. And he and I flew to Washington to see Root do a Christmas show at the University of Maryland. And Root always did a theme. One night he was a Marine, or he was a cop, and this night he was Santa. And he did the show. When the show was over, he said, "All right, all you girls, I want you to form a line to the left and come up here and sit on Santa's lap and tell me what you want for Christmas." And so they did, all hundreds of girls. I mean, they just did. And they walked up and they sat on Root's lap. And as they were talking, he took an amine nitrate and he popped it under their nose. Donald and I hit our head on the table laughing. And we just couldn't say no. And I made a record with Root in Florida with your dad. Your dad had never been around things like that. It was just an incredible scene.
In Florida.
And our favorite 30 days, just being doing that kind of project, it was great.
I mean, yeah, what a break from the intense sessions that were the Steely Dan sessions, just to have some fun and
it was around. The antithesis of that. There was no moment of stress in the Root Boy record. Except he had narcolepsy, and every once in a while he would just fall.
Oh my God, I don't want to laugh.
You can laugh. For one thing, he's not here anymore, so he won't hear you,
Oh my
and
God.
he would laugh with you.
So he had narcolepsy. So you would be doing like, would he fall? Okay, because I've seen various, like I've seen extreme narcolepsy, and I mean, would he just fall asleep while he was actually doing something, or was more when he
Well,
was
he didn't
relaxed?
fall. He never fell asleep. He didn't drop when he was singing, which
Uh
all
huh.
occurred in 1 2 hour period. He did everything, all the vocals,
Uh
but
huh.
that's something else. He didn't fall there, but he came in the control room, and there was a couch there, and there were 2 3 times he just dropped to the couch.
Wait, so he did his vocals in 2 hours, like the whole album?
Yes, but he was highly influenced, highly
I
under the
mean,
influence.
so we're talking 1979, eight,
Yes. No,
nine.
79. I think
Okay,
79.
in
Yeah.
Florida, 1979. That in itself was the Wild West.
And we were living in the house that it was the cover of an Eric Clapton album, Ocean Boulevard. I can't remember the number. And we rented that house. Your dad and I lived in that house for 30 days.
Wait a minute. Is this where
Okay.
the infamous scuba diving happened?
Absolutely.
Oh no, the infamous Gary Katz scuba diving photos.
No, I don't think there were any photos.
Yeah,
I have never seen a photo of that. I've seen a photo of Fagan with a silly snorkeling outfit on
yeah. We've
because
got
he didn't go scuba diving, he snorkeled.
okay, yeah. So this is oh wow. So 461 Ocean Boulevard. I
Yeah,
mean,
we lived there.
what an
Two
address.
women rented the house to your dad and I. I think they were undercover cops, but we liked the house.
Wow. So Root Boy Slim, that was where y'all, that's why you were all in Florida. Okay, because I found a box in my dad's garage that said Cats Scuba Diving 1977. So maybe it
And what
was,
does that mean?
you were scuba diving. You scuba dove with my dad, right?
Every single night.
Okay. So my dad had a camera and I have underwater photos of you scuba diving.
I would like to see that.
I'll have to show them to you. And we have
Really.
Donald in a little bikini bottom.
I've seen the picture of Donald on the, like, at the shallow water with some silly scuba gear on. I might have one picture of that myself, but
Yeah.
pictures of me? I don't think so.
Yep. So I'll have to share them with you because I think I shared them. I'll put them on the Discord and I'll send you a few. So
So, Cimcie, someone just texted me to say I'm on Cimcie Live, but no podcast. Is there something they have to know?
they're on. So you're on the YouTube.
They're
So
on the YouTube.
YouTube.com and it's on the live. It's the live show. It's not a podcast.
So they go to Cimcie.
Yep. So Cimcie sure. So youtube.com/ at I am Cimcie, and then it should just be on the front page. It should be live.
So it's I am Cimcie.
Yeah.
I have to tell them that. Okay. I am Cimcie.
Is that Judy? Should we call her?
No, it's Howie. It's okay.
Okay. So
Okay, I'm good.
it should be the front page of YouTube. And it
Either
should
he'll
just
either he'll figure it out or he won't.
well the fun thing about YouTube is it'll post it.
Oh, Wendy, I can't answer.
Uh-oh.
So other people are having a
We can
problem.
we can help Howie
What's
get
the
on.
problem, Wendy?
I can't get on.
What do you mean you can't get on?
You told me to go to Cimcie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm there, and then on YouTube, and it says live.
Right.
There's nothing there.
There's
Click
nothing
on
there.
it. Click on it.
Click on live.
I did. And then other videos come up of Steely Dan 1999. Steely Dan home video 1999.
So she's getting the video, not the live. What should she be clicking?
Just go click on the home tab.
The home tab. I did that before. Yeah. And then what?
Okay, click on the home, and then there should be a square, and it says Gary Katz on Cimcie Steely Dan chats. Can you click on that?
There should be a square. Gary Katz. I see music. Nope.
Live now. If you go to the home page of YouTube,
Yep.
My home page, you should just click on the live. It says live, and just if you click on that, it should just pop up, and we're live right now.
Okay. Searching. Okay, it says all shorts, unwatched, watched for you, recently uploaded and live. This is on Cimcie.
Yeah. Just go to the home page, and it's the first.
I pressed on live, and it's blank.
Are you subscribed? Maybe? Do you have to be subscribed?
I have no idea. I do other things on YouTube.
Yeah. So this is a live show. We're actually live right now. Click live.
Yeah, I can't keep doing this now, Wen.
Okay, go ahead. All right, I'll keep trying.
Okay.
And it should be Gary Katz.
It should be the home screen, and it should be live. It should be on the home screen, and it says, and you just click on it, and we should be there, and the chat is there.
And is this? But I have to put in Cimcie or just YouTube.
You are on my page, the Cimcie Shares All page.
No, I'm on YouTube.
So youtube.com/@IamCimcie.
Wait a minute, YouTube. Say that again.
.com.
Yep.
/@ I am Cimcie.
I missed the thing. We broke up. At what?
I am Cimcie.
I am Cimcie.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye.
What were we saying? We were snorkeling.
We were snorkeling. I think you just fired her, Gary. Did you?
My sister.
It's your sister. Everyone's laughing. We love it. I hope she gets on. Your sister, Wendy. It should just be the home screen, and it should just be live right now.
She's on her own.
Okay, we hope to see her in the chat.
Oh, God. What are people doing?
Look,
I don't know. They're not having an easy time figuring it out.
I don't know. Yeah, YouTube Live is we're there. We have 50 people in the chat right now.
Okay.
It's super excited. And we're back to Speedos and snorkeling. Okay, we're back to Speedos and snorkeling. So,
is it I am Cimcie?
Yeah, if you just search my name in YouTube, Cimcie Shares
No. Is it I am Cimcie?
Yeah, I am Cimcie.
Okay.
And then when you go to my page, it'll just say on the home screen, there should just be a live for them to click on and watch us.
Okay, we're snorkeling.
So we're snorkeling. Let's talk about scuba diving. How did you feel scuba diving with my dad? Was that the first time you scuba dove?
Yes, first and last.
First and last. Okay, let's talk about
a month after I came home from Miami. Jaws was out.
Oh.
First and last.
Okay, that would have done it. That would have done it.
It did.
How was it
Well,
scuba diving?
we were down there. Your dad, brought his gear, being a Malibu diver kind of guy,
Uh-huh.
and we that first night I said, "Oh, I'd love to go scuba." So we went to some rental place, got some gear, and we went out, and I couldn't breathe easily. So underwater, he took my gear off and put his gear on me and put my gear on him. And that night, we called his friends in Malibu, and they sent us a duplicate of your dad's gear. And so
Mm-hmm.
every night we would come home.
Night?
Every night we would come home around, anywhere from 1 to 3 in the morning, and we'd go in with lights,
That's
with a rope,
terrifying.
with a rope tied between our waists. And I said to your dad, "Well, what happens if there's a shark?" He said, "If you see a shark, just tell me. I'll take care of it." And I believed him, so I went.
Like my
Remember,
dad.
I nicknamed your dad his. I gave your dad his nickname. So
Aw.
I had faith in that immortal.
Aw. He was
Yeah,
that kind of guy. When he said that he knew how to do something, you believed him.
I did. It only backfired once in all the years I knew him.
When was that? How did it backfire?
Well, my girlfriend at the time and my wife later bought a waterbed, and she wanted to fill the waterbed up and use it. None of us knew how to do that. I said, "Roger will do it. He'll." So we went to her house. She was working. Of course, I didn't have anything to do with this, and your dad took the hose and he put it in the bed, and we were filling the bed up, and a little while later it exploded. And these many, many gallons of water were all over the house, in every inch of the house, ankle high. And she walked in, didn't say a word, walked out, came back 20 minutes later with a bottle of vodka, lay down on the couch. We never heard a word, and she drank it all till she passed out. That's the only time it ever backfired with your dad.
As an exploding waterbed. All
It
right.
exploded. It did. It did.
It
Otherwise, if your dad said to do something, we did it.
I love that. Yeah, waterbeds are funny. I mean,
It wasn't
did you,
funny that day.
yeah, to be fair, yeah, that doesn't sound very funny. But wait,
No.
so you said that so you named my dad the Immortal. Let's tell everybody where that came from. Where did the Immortal come from, Gary?
We were in the village. We had just, the first record we mixed, the first track we mixed of any Steely record was Do It Again.
Mm-hmm.
And after that was done, we did Reeling in the Years. Oddly enough, we just did those two first.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were mixing, Roger, your dad was going to get a sound on Donald's voice for Reeling in the Years. And Donald said to him, I liked what you did and what my voice sounded like on Do It Again, which was a big deal because Donald didn't love his voice at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say that he liked it, so your dad said, okay. And Donald and I went across the street to the diner that he and I and others frequented, 24-hour diner, all hours of the night. We went there while your dad worked. When we came back, your dad was sitting on the floor and he was holding two wires, as it turned out, two live wires,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't hear us come in, and he was connecting those wires, and they just melted in his hand. Literally melted. He was holding them. I don't know why he was still there, but he was still sitting erect while that stuff that melts was dripping on the floor. And then he just put the wires down. And after a moment of what the F, I named him the Immortal.
Wow. So he melted. I heard about that. I heard that is one. It's funny because when we were interviewing people 10 years ago, everybody had their own reason for why he was named the Immortal, but that's where it came from.
That is where it came from.
He electrocuted himself
He should
and
have, but he didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
he melted his hand. I thought he also did he melt his hand onto a piece of gear or just he was holding the wires
He
and they
was sitting
melted?
on the floor, and
Ew.
then he explained to us that this piece of gear, which was called the Cooper Time Cube, it was like
Uh-huh.
you could double the voice and just made an effect. He was sitting on the floor and later saying to us that it had not functioned and he was trying to fix it. So he had these wires in his hand at the moment that he was trying to fix it. But Donald and I did see it melt in his hands.
Oh my gosh. That is a good reason to get the name Immortal. Like he had some pretty close calls in his days. I heard that he was on a roller coaster ride on Santa Monica Pier, and the roller coaster in front of him flew off into the ocean. He was on a Ferris
And
wheel.
what did he do? Fly, get the car, and put it back on?
No, 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 no. He said that he was the last car on the tracks. He also got electrocuted on a Ferris wheel at Disneyland. I
Well,
don't
he
know.
didn't, obviously. Eh, Let's just leave it that your dad's background is not fully explained.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
You
And
know,
he
do
said
you know the story about his uncle in Lake Charles?
no.
So he told us, I always believed your dad. He was living in Lake Charles, Louisiana with his family,
Uh-huh.
and his father's brother, his uncle,
Hmm.
was an Air Force test pilot and went up one day to test, called down and said there was a unidentified flying object, and they never saw him again. That's what your dad told me.
He
And
saw
like I
you.
said, I always believed your dad.
For those in the chat, my dad kind of reminded me of the movie Big Fish. Tim Burton did this movie where the dad would tell all these extreme stories and they sound so larger than life you didn't really know whether to believe them or not, and then after he passed, like all of them were true. My dad's stories were kind of like that. They were always larger than life, but I mean they were also true. Aliens, yeah, my dad did see a UFO. He loved the alien stuff. I mean, did you guys ever talk about sci-fi? I mean, the 70s, Star Trek was a thing.
No,
Which
we were not that, but there were incidents, during those years that were there was a bunch of people, very well known people, doctors, lawyers, all sorts of people who were called to a place in Oregon because they were going to be taken on a given date to a higher plane. And I remember I came in the studio and I said, "What's this?" He said, "It's one day I'll tell you."
dun dun
I
dun.
always believed your dad was an alien, and I'm happy to believe that without any abuse I take from various people. So I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. He was summoned back. He was summoned back to the mothership. So, okay. Early Steely Dan days. You go to LA, you hook up with Steve Barry. You bring Donald and Walter out,
Yep.
and they're signed as songwriters, right?
Yes.
And then you guys form Steely Dan band, and then that's when you meet my dad, correct?
Well, when Donald and Walter came out, soon thereafter we called, Danny and Skunk and Jim. And Steve worked in the studio every day. I mean, literally every day except the weekend. And so we would have to go in the studio at night to be able to use it when it wasn't booked at night. And sometimes we'd go in at midnight. We didn't have an engineer. Certainly, we didn't have any money to hire one at the time. And your dad was the graveyard shift lacquer cutter for ABC Dunhill. He was cutting vinyl from midnight to 6 or 8 in the morning. And so he was the odd body that was hanging out and could help us. So he did.
I love it. I love it. And then so you guys start working on the first album, Can't Buy a Thrill.
That is true. But not, yeah.
Well, I was gonna segue into the recently discovered photos and you guys trying to come up with a title for that album. But what were you gonna say before we got into that?
No, I was going to, you keep going. I'll explain how it happened and your dad's just brilliant idea. Brilliant.
So some of my friends in the chat know that I have recently, I mean, not discovered, but rediscovered that we have negatives from 72, 73, 74 of you guys in the studio, you guys on the street in Hollywood, and a lot of fun photos from the first years of Steely Dan, which are super exciting because there's not a lot of them. My dad was a photographer and just so happened to have all this professional gear. And now we are so grateful because those are like some of the only photos that exist of you guys in the studio in those early days.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. There's some pretty good photos. You guys look
I saw a couple that were fun. Yeah.
You guys look really cool. So let's talk about that first album. You said my dad, you were on the street, you were shooting covers.
There was always this conversation of what's the first album going to be? What's it going to be called? What's the cover going to be? But we were, newbies. We didn't have any, we couldn't control all the things we wanted or they wanted until after the first album. And then, it became easier. But for the first album, there was a conversation in the studio about what should it be and how could it be. And your dad said that he had an idea. And his idea was to round up some cows and go to the World Trade Center at the time, which I'm sorry to say, talk about, and put those cows in the freight elevator of the World Trade Center, take them to the roof, have them meander around the roof, rent a helicopter, fly above the roof, shoot a photograph down of those cows, and call the album High Stakes. That was your dad's idea for the album. We left. I think there was 30 seconds of, gee, you think we could get the cows? And then, that was just ridiculous.
High Stakes! Oh, no! Oh! Y'all, thanks to some other creative geniuses in the room, the first Steely Dan album was not called High Stakes.
No, but if your dad had his way, it might have been. But it wasn't, no. No, it was Can't Buy a Thrill, and the album cover was done by somebody we didn't know, an ABC person, and it wasn't high stakes.
High stakes. Ugh, I feel a meme coming. I'll have to get my Dan Vault friends. We have a bunch of super excited people in the chat, and I just want to give a shout out to all y'all. We've been having so much fun with the Steely Dan, the home videos I've been posting and the photos. The Dan Vault has been making great videos, and I've got my I've got uh, all sorts of yacht rock friends here, and there's this amazing thing happening. They're calling it the Danissance. Have you heard that term? There's this new it's like a groundswell past couple years. There's been like 20-year-olds, Gen Z, millennials have discovered Steely Dan, and it's gotten kind of a resurgence. And so there's discords, and there's chat, and there's memes. There's all sorts of fun stuff that these young people are creating, and I'm amazed and excited. And what do you feel about that? Like,
I don't I don't know what to say about it. It's 50 some odd years later, and people are still not only listening but talking about that music.
mhm.
Who could imagine?
I know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. That is amazing. That's something that 50 years ago, here you were, a bunch of kids. You were a kid at one point.
Not at that point, but I used to be a kid. Yeah.
I mean, a kid for today's standards.
Yeah.
But you know, making records that would still be talked about in 50 years, that is hard to do. It's hard to get one hit, let alone hit
It, it,
after hit after hit, and
it wasn't
then
so
be
much all the
talking
hit.
about it.
Yeah, people still like the records. That's cool.
28-year-old here, 61 here. I mean, the age range for Steely Dan fans right now is kind of beautiful. I've had
Yeah,
an
it's cool.
18 year
Very
old.
cool. Very
I've
cool.
had 18-year-olds reach out to me, and then guys and gals in their 60s. I know, not just kids anymore. Not just for kids anymore. 18
Oh, they're
here.
kids to me.
The Dan Vault, 18. And they're recreating all the songs. It was
Cool.
the perfect storm. It was the perfect storm of your guidance, getting those guys a deal, them with their genius, my dad with the recording genius. And it really was a perfect storm of creativity, having the right guys on their team to help them be seen. And I mean, that doesn't happen every day.
It was a it was a good time. It worked. It worked the way we could only hope for.
Mm. Hmm. Yep, it worked. It worked. It worked. So we're in the first album, and I mean, we could probably go into anecdotes of each album for hours, but let's just kind of skim over the top and get into. I mean, so you've got hit after hit after hit, and then we get into Asia and Gaucho. I mean, once you guys migrated from the Steely Dan band to the session guys and stuff, how did your job change? I mean, I mean, how do you feel about being in charge of a band and then being in charge of tens of musicians and organizing that and hiring and firing people? I'd love to hear how you feel about that era and that transition as a producer.
There really wasn't. It really wasn't anything different in the studio um, when we started using session players. In that, guys would show up. Donald would show them how the song went. It wasn't anything vastly different. When the band was there, there was there were rehearsals to teach the band. When the session players came, Donald and Walter would go outside. Donald would play the song down. There'd be some questions. There were always chord sheets, and It wasn't really much different.
Okay. Well, so I mean, I'm just thinking like the pressure for you to have to hire and I mean, we
I
were
never
dealing with.
felt pressure. For one thing, none of that was me. Everything we did, we talked about,
Mhm.
amongst ourselves. It wasn't like, I did something and then I came to the studio and said, "Oh, Fagan, this is what I did." We talked about everything. Every musician that showed up, we had talked about amongst ourselves, saying, "Let's do this." Um, and we hired the kind of musicians you couldn't really go wrong.
Mhm. And then I mean, I Denny actually said that yeah, Donald would say something, tell Walter, Walter would tell you, and then you would go make it happen.
I don't know
Uh,
what that means. I don't recall it being like that. It just depends what aspect of the day. When the musicians showed up, Donald and Walter would go in the room and they would talk about what they wanted. Walter might sit with Chuck Rainey, and Rainey might say to Walter, who also is the bass player, what would you like me to do here? And Walter might say to him, it'd be cool if you did X and Y. And otherwise, we hired them because of their greatness. And so we wanted them to play what they wanted to play.
mhm. And how
We
would they
wanted their first thoughts.
their first thoughts, and then what would happen when they would have to do like take after take after take?
It
How was
depends
that?
who was in the room. For one thing, yes, we did, on occasion, we did, a good number of takes, but the stories that are abound, are not true. We didn't do 90 takes. We had one song that I personally, with Jeff Picaro and Chuck Rainey, the song Gaucho. We spent all night doing this because Donald and Walter didn't think it was going to work. They went home. I didn't want to lose that song. I just loved it. So we stayed, and yes, we did a lot of work. Other than
Mm.
that, we had high expectations, but we didn't go in and do 60 or 90 takes as I would hear about.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm checking the chat. Yes. I mean,
We
you
didn't.
you didn't.
We were exacting, but we hired exacting musicians.
Uh huh. Was I guess what so we're in Asia and we're moving to Gaucho, and so you hired exacting musicians, and you say you didn't do take after take, but there are stories of take after take. I guess maybe because it took so long in the studio. I mean, how did you feel about taking? I mean, Gaucho was like a year, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5,
Well,
a
8 to
year or
5?
two, or just it was all day. My dad said it was like Monday through Friday, 8 hour
No,
days.
no, your dad didn't quite have that right. They were 7 days a week, and they were I wish they were 8-hour days. We worked, and Walter hadn't had a car accident,
Hmm.
and he wasn't as available as he usually was. He was injured badly,
Mm.
and so second arrangement, boogie to your puke root, and um, Walter got injured. We had a track that was erased that caused, work wise and emotion wise, a bit of a setback. And so it took us a while to, sort of gain our footing. I don't think Gaucho took a year, but Asia did.
Hmm. There's actually questions from our audience and our friends here about that get into detailed questions about Gaucho. So I'll save some of the questions for Chad. I guess I would just love to know. I would just love to know. I want to hear the studio anecdotes. And we've heard the mustard story. We heard the mustard on the tape story. And we heard the high stakes. Are there any other fun, exciting moments anecdotes that you can think of in the studio that haven't quite been talked about ad nauseum?
As questions come, I'll try and include anecdotes, but just to pick them out of the air, there was always things going on. So
Uh, Pete Fogel is falling asleep in the chat. He wanted to make sure we knew.
no, Pete. What do you want to know, Pete?
Yeah.
They should be talking to you, Pete, not me.
I actually asked you a question once, Gary, and I said about Donald's handwriting because I was going through some tubs of my stuff. And,
yeah, you told me that was Donald's drawing. Maybe I just don't remember. That's all.
Yes, yeah, and I said I asked Pete, and you said that's a good source.
Pete's a much better source than me.
Oh, he's actually on Facebook chatting. We're not even on Facebook. Okay, so I'm going to take a few minute break. And since we are nearing the first hour, I think this is a good time to bring on Chad because we do have a lot of questions from the audience. So we'll take a few minutes here. We're going to boogie till we puke, and we'll bring on Chad and we'll start to ask the audience questions.
So what does that mean? Do I have 2 minutes or no?
Yes, you have 2 minutes. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be right back.
Okay.
Back. I had a mind melt moment, Chad. So thank you so much for coming on to help organize the questions. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks. And the questions are just flying in. We've got a ton.
I think that's why I was like, oh wait, sorry. Root Boy's still playing. Hold on.
That's good. That's good.
I know, we love it. I love Root Boy Slim. I think for a while we had Root glasses. It said ROOT.
I got a bunch of them in my drawer.
Ooh, I want one. Yeah.
And every Root t-shirt.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back, Gary. This is our friend Chad. He's been our super mod the past month as we work through these chats, and he's helped me with questions the past few weeks. So thank you so much for joining us, Chad.
Of course. And, pleasure to talk to you, Gary. And I'm just going to relay all the questions that we've gotten. Pre-live chat, we asked for people to post things on Twitter and Facebook and all the other channels. And boy, the audience today is just, it's just scrolling past with questions. So I'm going to try to get to as many as I possibly can as you'll have patience with me. So it looks like I'm going to sort of go off the script a little bit here because we've gotten a bunch of questions about an unreleased track called Heartbreak Souvenir. Everybody seems to be very into that song and wanting to know anything you can remember about it.
I know we did the track. I know we lost the track. And I can't tell you much more about that particular one. I don't remember.
Do you happen to remember if there was a connection to another lost track called Kind Spirit? That was the other question that came in.
It's another track I remember we did that we lost, meaning we didn't use it.
Right.
But I have nothing specific I can tell you about either one.
Okay. Got it. All right. So let's go to the next question. Jim Ferraiulo on Twitter. I'm dying to know if there is any film footage from inside the studio. I think we know the answer to that. Okay.
No.
Bummer. That would have been fun to watch. Dan Novak on Twitter wants to know who was funnier in the studio, Walt or Don? Loaded question there.
There was an accumulative effect amongst the people in a room. There was no one stand-up comic.
Y'all were pretty okay. Between Dad though and Walter, Dad punning all the time. My dad was addicted to puns.
Your dad was the worst punner, and it was almost abusive at a point. Not so much the comment, but the repetition. Your father had like an automatic kind of thing built in. So if he heard certain words, he would say the same thing each time. Over the years, we heard them a lot.
Oh no. Oh no, Dad with the repeating puns like high stakes. I can't wait to see that meme, by the way, the Dan Vault. Dan Vault!
I'm going to have to work on one of those too. All right. So, Camps Jams, who was with us today on the stream, wants to know, Gary, if you still have your famous pig nose t-shirt.
No. But I don't. I have lots of my old stuff, but I don't have that. No.
Pig nose shirt. Where's that from?
It's from the back cover of Katie Lied.
Oh. Wait, is that with the
Helium. It's the only pictures of anybody on any album.
Mm-hmm. Besides the infamous one where my dad's hand is coming from underneath the console, there's that amazing back cover. What album is that, Chad? With Dad, the back cover?
Countdown to
Yeah, that's Countdown.
Okay. Whose idea was that to get Dad underneath the console, the recording console?
It wasn't the issue of getting your dad to do that. The issue was getting your dad not to do that. But there he was. I was standing just on the other side of that console. And it, what can I say? Your dad, for some reason, found himself under the console and put his hand up. No direction. Your dad was, creative on his own.
It's so iconic. People can't, they're like, whose hand is that? Some people think it's yours. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Fantastic.
So,
it wouldn't have dawned on me to go under the console.
And they wanted. Okay, so let's talk about the helium tank. Actually, while we're there at the helium tank in Sombrero, what do you remember about the Schlitz ad? The Schlitz beer jingle we've all recently heard and had a lot of fun with. Did you have to go get the helium tank, or was the ad agency?
No. One of those guys came in with the helium. I think it was Jeff, but I could be wrong. It wasn't me, wasn't Donald, wasn't Walter, that I'm sure of. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Denny, so by reason of elimination, I'm going to say it was probably Skunk. Probably. Don't mean to demean you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, well, so he did the helium, he did the Spanish. He did
well. Jeffrey was born in Mexico.
Yeah, and then the sombreros, though.
The sombrero, all of the additional, paraphernalia came in the room by the people who want them. We didn't order anything. I didn't order anything. I did not produce that element of the session.
Did y'all work on any other jingles, or was the beer jingle the only one?
That was the only one.
Wow.
I think it got infamous. I think it was infamous what happened, and they all shunned us.
I love it. Okay, sorry for the distraction, Chad. Let's go back to the questions.
Not at all. It's all relevant. It's all great. All right, let's go back to my pool of questions here. So Glenn, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, Iba, wants to know the origin of your production, Gary, on the Eye to Eye album from 1982. He says the song On the Mend is a favorite of his.
I don't remember that song, but I was at Warner Brothers and someone sent me a track or two of their music. They had been producing music in England, and I was drawn to it. I was in England. I met Julian and Deborah, and we talked. I suggested we do an album. I signed them to Warner Brothers, and that's how that happened. And they remain, both of them, close friends of mine right now.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
David Bianco, who was on the chat with us, I believe, on the stream here, wants to know the electrostatic speakers, were those sort of, was the inception of using those around the time of Pretzel Logic in the studio, and did it influence how the album ended up sounding, especially the high end? I'm paraphrasing. It was a sort of deeper question than that, but I wanted to make it easier to digest.
The speakers he's talking about were called magnaplaners, and they didn't appear on Pretzel Logic. They appeared on Katie Lied. And Walter and Denny were our, apart from your dad, I think your dad went also. They were our tech people. Donald and I really didn't have any expertise, and that's a stretch even to use that word, regarding, equipment and hi-fi gear. And they went to West LA one day, and they brought back 8 large panels of magnaplaners that we lined up in front of the console, in front of the glass, and we mixed Katie Lied with them, and it was great sounding.
Great. All right, so going back to the earlier days, Billy SBC, who is with us on the stream, wants to know that when Walter and Donald first walked into your office, did you want to call security, or were you ready to give them a job right away?
Oh, no. I knew Donald and Walter from Brooklyn long before we went to LA. They didn't walk in the office. Along with Steve Bowie, we made an arrangement and they came out, but I had known them for the few years before we came to LA.
And when they got to LA, I've never heard this story, but apparently Billy knows it. Did you guys ever get arrested going through a drive-through at Jack in the Box?
Not me. I've never been to Jack in the Box.
There you go. All right, moving on. Music Tracker, who's on the stream. Laura Nyro's album, Walk the Dog and Light the Light. What do you remember about those sessions?
Just fabulous. She's one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite people. We were really good friends for many years. And I'm a Hall of Fame night owl, and so was she. And we would talk some nights, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And she called me one night and said that she had been in remission, and now she wasn't anymore. And she had an album that she wanted to do, and called and said, let's do it together. So we did, and it was Bernard Purdy, Chuck Rainey, Elliot Randall, Michael Landau, and Laura, late at night up at a studio Donald and I owned called River Sound. And it was like, going to some great club and listening to guys play fabulous music and her playing and singing. It was just great. There's a reason she's in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Agreed. Cameron Fairchild on the stream with us today wants to know if, he just asked a follow-up question too. Did you go to high school with Kenny Vance, and, any stories from the early days with Kenny, with Jay and the Americans?
I did not go to school with Kenny Vance. He grew up in Belle Harbor, and I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to school with Howie, who was a member of Jay and the Americans. And, I was like a 5th or 6th wheel to them. They were having hits and making records with my favorite, producers, Lever and Stoller. So I glommed on, and where they went, I went. And sort of gave me an entree into the studio more than the music business. And again, got to meet Mike and Jerry, who befriended me. And, I don't even know what to say about that, but they were my favorite music producers and writers, and I watched them one night after I met them. What happened was there was a song called "Only in America," and the Drifters, Mike and Jerry wrote that and recorded it with the Drifters, which was my favorite singing group at the time, Benny King. And no station south of Washington would play it.
Oh.
So Mike and Jerry loved the song, as they should. So they erased the Drifters, unbelievable as that was, and they put Jay and the Americans on it. And so I went to the studio that day, and there was Mike and Jerry. And, I saw it. And Jerry said to me, if you want, why don't you come back some days? We're recording. Well, that was like an invitation to, sitting in on the best. And so I did, and I went there one night. They were recording Cool, Cool Kitty from New York City. And I saw Jerry say to Mike, I don't know, I don't really like that. Ask them to, I don't know, make it a little purplish. And I realized when he did that, I said, I can do that. And so I just felt comfortable being in the studio. I didn't write music, I didn't play music. I should have, but didn't. And yet I felt like I had an ear to know what was good or not good or what I liked. And watching Jerry work as a non-musical person also with his ear, that was one of the best parts about being around those guys.
Well, you were certainly right, Gary, about having an ear. So, as all of the stuff that you've produced has sort of bore out over the years, it's amazing. All right, so
good ears.
For sure. Let's talk about, if we can, Michael Kaplan wants to know about the chronology of the second arrangement. Do you remember when it was erased and what studio was it recorded at? I think we might have covered this previously, but if anything you can add to that.
I was in the Stage Delicatessen having dinner with my daughter and my son, and Roger walked in and said they erased second arrangement. Well, with all due respect to Cimcie, Roger could be, a joker. I didn't take him seriously. He wasn't crying. I finished my meal. I walked around the corner to the studio, which was the basement of Studio 54. It's not there anymore, so it's okay to say it was called Soundworks. And my son and daughter, we walked around the corner and downstairs, and when we walked in, there was the tech person sitting on the floor crying. And I got the drift that Roger wasn't kidding. That's what happened. The engineer was aligning the digital machine. And he went to the leader, and he thought he was at the tail leader, but he was at the head leader. So when he put all 32 tracks into record to align the machine, he was erasing everything.
All but the last 14 seconds, if the lure is just true.
A little more than 14 seconds, but no verses and no choruses.
Oh, wow.
And none of us we didn't make copies. We would leave the studio at 2:30 in the morning. We were going to be back at 1. There was no point. I wasn't going to listen, so we didn't have extra copies. Well, your dad made a copy for some reason. I'm not sure why, but he did. But we were back the next day, like 9 hours later.
Work tapes.
I don't know what that means. I can't imagine he went home and listened, but whatever.
Cassette tapes. That's what I was told it was like. They would take cassette tapes of the mix to go home and listen to whatever.
No, it had to be DATs. None of us took cassettes to listen to anything, but there were DATs being made, and I
Late
think that's
80s.
where you got it from.
Late 80s. Well, how is it working below Studio 54?
Yeah.
How
It was
many
fine.
nights?
You wouldn't even know.
But I want to know
You-
about going. Okay, how many times did you guys go up there to party?
I never went, and
You never
I don't.
went?
No, never.
Donald,
I
Walter?
I don't know of any of us who ever went upstairs to quote party.
My
But
mom
we did
went.
do, well, your mom was a party girl. Of course she went.
I think she was only like 24 or 23 for her, to her defense. Hi, Mom. She's in the chat, by the way. She says, hi, Gary.
Hey, Connie. The only thing we did,
You guys
there
didn't go up
was
there
a
to
door,
dance? Oh,
there was a
man.
there was a door in the back of the studio that had a staircase that went up into the main room of 54. No, we didn't do that. But there was a pay-per-view fight that they were going to show in Studio 54, a Don King production. And I don't know if you know who Don King is, Cimcie, but he was the premier boxing promoter. And you didn't want to, I don't know, you didn't want to steal from him. Let's leave it at that. But we wanted to watch the fight. So your dad went upstairs and he spliced the wire and he ran a wire downstairs. So we sat in the control room and we watched the fight with our feet up, wondering if any one of Don King's assistants were going to come and, sort of carry us away. But that's the only thing I can remember of being involved with Studio 54.
Oh my God, I've heard some stories. I think, was that the studio Paul Sloman was working at? He fought. I don't know if there's stories we can necessarily talk about. So maybe I'll just move on to the next question.
Well, they may be. I'm sure there were stories you wouldn't want to talk about today, but it wasn't me. And if your dad was there, he didn't come in the morning and tell us about it.
Yeah, all right. Well, that was a missed opportunity, Gary Katz. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Okay.
You guys weren't dancers, though, I guess. I mean, I guess I can't see that, though. I don't see Donald Fagen letting loose at a club. Maybe we should, though. Maybe it's time.
Well, you
Maybe
can
we
call
should
him.
go dancing.
You can call him and suggest it.
Mom says, your dad and I danced a lot at Studio 54. My dad was a dancer. He actually won a dancing contest. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah. But before his recording days, when he was in high school, he actually won a dancing contest.
In Cucamonga.
Yep. In Cucamonga.
Quite a thing to be able to say. Winning dancing contests in Cucamonga.
I love it. That's where I got my dancing skills from. So there you
go.
go.
Okay.
There you go. All right. So next question, Chad. Thanks. These are great.
Oh, for sure. So I guess as a follow-up to the whole second arrangement debacle, the re-recording, and this is from Lady Aptitude, who's with us on the stream. When everybody went back into the studio and tried to record it again, why was it not up to standard? Did you think it was acceptable, Gary? Do we know? I mean, I don't think we have tapes of that because they would have surfaced by now, I'm sure. But anything you remember about the re-recording attempts?
Well, the re-recording, I'm kind of responsible for that because that was at the moment, it was my favorite song that we were recording for the record and what I thought for sure was going to be the single. So I wanted to re-record it more than anyone else. But we needed songs for Gaucho. We were short songs. Which in retrospect, created Third World Man. That might not have made the record if we had second arrangement, because maybe we would have felt we had enough songs, and I would have been unhappy in retrospect if we didn't finished Third World Man, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. Begs another question just about that era. So the Bear, was that an Asia recording that got left off, or was that a Gaucho era track?
You mean The Bear Got You?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Fair enough.
I just don't remember. Were you Third World Man was not Third World Man when it was written. Actually, it was called Were You Blind That Day? And it was recorded an hour after we did Asia, because Asia was recorded in one take and we had time. We didn't know what to do at the time. And Don said, well, I have this song, Were You Blind That Day? So Gad played Were You Blind That Day? Because again, we were there, for no time.
Right.
And when we lost second arrangement, Donald said, we have that track from Gad playing it, on the Asia dates. I'll rewrite it and we can use that. And it turned out to be Third World Man.
And is the story about Gad being down the hall recording something else when you guys were mixing Asia? Is that true? Where he didn't know it was him on the on the final
wait a minute.
cut?
Ask me the question the way you did again. Is it true that what?
Is it true that Steve Gadd was recording, when you guys were mixing, I think you were finalizing the mixes for Asia, and then you brought him down to listen to it, and he said, who's that?
It's a little more colorful than that. But
Okay.
yeah, he was recording with Michael Franks down the hall, and we had just about finished the mix. And someone walked in and said, Gad's down the hall with Michael Franks. And I said, okay, I'll go down and let him know we're finishing, mixing, that we're down here, which I did. And I said, Donald, Walter, and I are down the hall. Why don't you come down? And he walked in, and, it was the end of the day for him. He had been playing. I said, I want to play you something. And we played him a finished mix of Asia. He sat right in front of the speakers. We played it really loud. It was great sounding, just great. And when it was done, he turned and said, you'll have to excuse this expression, who's that? Who's playing drums? And so Donald, Walter, and I, and your dad and Elliot, the five of us, looked at each other, like, and I said, you are stupid. And he said, I'm a motherfucker. That's what happened.
That's amazing.
Good story and true.
All right, let's do a few more from the folks on the stream. So SV O'Rourke wants to know, is it true that Howard Kalin of the Turtles was offered the lead singer gig in Steely Dan around 72?
No.
Okay.
No. We are thrilled that Howard and Mark showed up one night. It was about as much fun as we could have in one night, but no is the answer.
Right. SinSat or SinCat Pro, can you please ask Gary which mix of the albums he produced he thinks is the best?
When we left it, well,
That's
I'll say
a big
one
question.
thing. Well, for all the records that we did, well, I was involved in 7, I think. 8, 7. We never remixed one song. When we left, it was done. So every mix we did was as good as we thought it could be that night, and never revisited one track. So
And do you have a favorite of any album, Dan or not Dan, that you've produced over the years? Anything stand out that you're most proud of?
Hard.
Except for Root Boy,
Except for Root Boy. That's an exception.
Katie lied.
Okay.
Why? Do you have
Yeah.
a why?
Great music.
Mm-hmm. The feeling, everything was
despite
there.
despite the infamous problem we had.
The
It was
DBX,
it was
the
my favorite.
Katie Light, and was that the
Halfway
first?
crucified on the other side of no tomorrow.
And that was the first. Was that the first album? Wait, was that the fourth album? So the first three were the Steely Dan band, and so that was the first one where.
No.
Did I get it
First
wrong?
two were the band, and the third we started to splinter. Jim Gordon played drums, and to where we met Jeff Vaccaro and David Page. They played Night by Night. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that was the beginning of utilizing other people.
Okay, and actually, I have my friend Kyle Kyleman is actually in the Facebook chat. I'm sorry if I'm not engaging with the Facebook chat, folks, because it's mainly we're chatting on YouTube, but I see some of the questions. Kyle actually helped us do your interview a decade ago. So Kyle says hi, and he's in the
Hi.
chat, and he wants to know your. Okay, I want to know your thoughts about Nightfly. Do you like my microphone? Does it look Nightfly-ish?
Oh, that's the story. So when the photograph was taken for the cover,
Uh,
everything was fine until Donald noticed that the microphone was backwards.
oh no, I've done that.
So
Oh no.
they reshot it.
So the cover is the microphone the right side, right?
They redid it when Donald realized it was backwards.
Somebody told me I had it backwards too. So I feel you, Donald. It's a great cover. How cool.
Very cool.
So
Really
moody. It's a cool cat, that Donald Fagan in that photo. So what are your thoughts
Yep.
on the Nightfly? So that happened so now we're in it's the first solo project. How was that migrating from Steely Dan band stuff to Donald as a solo project? How did that feel?
Probably was weirder for him than me
Mm.
because he didn't have his partner. And I don't know. I mean, it was just it was different. Walter wasn't there to fine tune things as he did or play, which Donald and I loved. So we relied on some other people that we knew but hadn't utilized before, and Wendell became a star.
Mm. That was actually Kyle's question from earlier too. Sorry if I'm not getting all your questions, Kyle. But what are your memories of Wendell? How it got made, the funding, the use on the track, and awarding of the gold record, actually platinum record, to Wendell. Yeah, so Wendell was the star of Nightfly. Got invented for Gaucho.
Wendell got invented because one day when we couldn't get a track for Hey 19, Donald turned to your dad and said, "Can't you fucking invent a machine that'll play steady drum tracks?" That's what happened. And your father said, "Yeah, give me the money and the time and I'll do it." So
Yes.
we did. Donald, we did. And he basically left for a few months and sat in his apartment on Lincoln Towers that you couldn't walk into because I went there once for some reason and you had to stand outside the door to talk to him, at least at that point, because there were all of these things on the floor. And so I remember I went there for 2 minutes and stood outside and talked to him about something. And then one day he said, "Okay, I'm ready." And he came to the studio. Well, you know what it is. It's his mainframe, IBM mainframe, and quite heavy. And he came in studio. The studio was a staircase down from the street level. So someone helped him. Donald and I wanted nothing to do with this. And so we stood all the way in the corner when your father and guys were helping him with this gear. We didn't want any part of this. We were just laughing. He plugged it in And these things kept going up and down, like really fast zeros, and one just stopped. We had no idea what it was, and
A
he
computer, y'all. It's a
he
computer.
meant nothing to us. And about a half hour later, your dad said to Donald, "So hit this key when you want the snare to come down." And he did, and Wendell was born. And the very
Mm.
first day, it worked immediately with no problem. And then within a couple of hours, when Donald realized what Wendell could actually do, which was dangerous because it now allowed Donald to manufacture that drum part, meaning hi hat and all, you know, 16th note by 16th note.
Oh God.
But
The
a couple hours,
power.
later, we had Hey 19.
Mm.
And
And
when
so,
we got to Nightfly, Wendell played every track except one.
which one? I thought it played all of them. Do you remember?
Oh, I remember. You don't know? Gee
No.
whiz.
I know. I'm not the expert. I'm not the expert. Chad's the expert.
The only track that wasn't Wendell was played by the new Rolling Stones drummer.
Oh. Which track did you say that? Did I black out?
Walk Between the Raindrops.
Oh. He did not play that? Wendell did not play that.
Absolutely not. Steve Jordan.
That's so interesting because I actually found Walk Between the Raindrops on a hard drive and I thought it was Wendell that did it.
No.
Oh no,
Wendell
it's another
played everything
mystery.
but that. One afternoon, Steve came downstairs to Soundworks and he played Walk Between the Raindrops.
And do you remember Wendell getting its platinum record? Do you remember how that happened?
No, I don't. I have no recollection of that. You should have a better one than I do.
Yeah, no, but you were there. I came after the
No,
fact. I heard it through Dad.
no, I
Yeah.
wasn't there.
The story goes that when Gaucho was nominated for a Grammy, I guess the list of musicians were part of the nomination process back in the day, and Wendell was listed as a musician.
That may be, but I wasn't there.
Yeah, and then the record, and my dad had to call Naris and say, "Look, Wendell's a computer; it's not really a person." And they laughed
Well,
about
back
it.
in Nightfly, we gave Jeff Beccaro credit for
Yeah.
all the tracks.
Yeah, that's great, actually. So Jeff Beccaro
Well,
has
we
a
sat
credit because he used his samples, right?
Well, we would go into the village, and Wendell was reduced now not to the mainframe, but a computer, and we'd be in the village, and we'd put Wendell here, and Jeffrey would stand up, and he would say, "So what do you want?" And Donald would say, "I don't know. Let's try Purdy's kick drum and Keltner's hi hat and your snare." And
Too
that's how
much.
all the tracks were made for a Nightfly like that with Jeffrey.
Oh, it's so good. Oh my God, you have like the most amazing drummers on the planet, and you just get to pick and choose.
And notwithstanding Jeffrey being, one of my favorite musicians, he got a lot of work from that record.
Gaucho. Yeah.
Well, he played Nightfly. No,
Oh, Nightfly.
all on Nightfly is Jeff Beccaro.
And someone asked earlier, he was not on Asia, or was he busy? What happened with him? Is he not around during Asia? Do you remember?
No.
No? Yeah.
Is he not around? And he's not on any track? I'm not thinking about it right now.
Yeah, Chad,
He's
I don't
not
know
on any
either.
track?
I don't think he is. I'm trying to think back through the list. I don't believe so.
Somebody asked about that.
I don't know. No, there's no reason.
There's
no reason.
No reason.
No.
So it's not true. Jeff Beccaro didn't hate Wendell. He
Oh no. Jeff was a postmodern man.
postmodern man. Jeff Beccaro. My dad loved Jeff Beccaro too. I actually have somewhere a drawing Jeff did of my dad.
He was as good an artist as he was a drummer. He was an incredible artist, Jeffrey.
Mm.
Jeffrey would come when he'd finish his sessions, and he would just sit and draw, or he'd fall asleep on the couch, and we liked it.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a picture of him asleep on the couch, I think at Cherokee Studios.
That's
You
really
too.
funny. I don't ever remember us working one. Oh, you mean Cherokee and the ranch?
The
Sorry.
ranch, yeah, the
Yeah, yeah,
ranch.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
ranch. Those were the Wild West days too. I've talked about that a few times on this channel. Is there anything you remember from the Cherokee days? Anything that stands out?
Funny. The other day I had the TV on and somebody was talking about it was some anniversary day of the day Nixon resigned. And I remember we were working in the studio. There was no TV in the studio. And someone said, "Hey, Nixon's going to resign." And we walked up into the main house and watched that. I don't know why. I remember that.
And y'all were next to Charles Manson's ranch too. I've said that a
Not
few
next
times.
to it, but in that
Spawn
general
Ranch.
area. Yeah.
Were you there? Dad actually. When was the Charles Manson stuff? Because Dad was actually installing stereo system in Roman Polanski's house, and he got questioned about the murders.
Nope.
Remember any of that lore?
Nope. Not
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a few people asking
And it was
about.
before I knew your dad,
Okay.
because that
Okay.
was 69, 70.
Okay. 69, 70. Sorry, I have to. My timeline. My timeline is fluid. Okay, so I have a few people asking about Wayne Shorter's solo.
Fabulous. What do you want to know?
What do you want to know? Yeah, they say ask about it, but what do y'all want to know about it?
So we had Asia, and there was this solo that needed to be done. And Walter and Donald would say to me, even long before Asia, well, why don't we call? And they'd say some, pretty well known name. At one point, like Phil Woods, who wound up playing on Dr. Wu, my favorite Steely song. And he'd say, I don't know, who do you think should play? I don't know, call Phil Woods, just as a joke, like call Ray Charles, maybe he'll come in and sing. And I would call all these guys. After a while, we got enough of a reputation, so guys took the call, and I called Phil Woods. I remember that one particularly because I actually went to the airport and picked him up and drove him back. It was all within like an hour and a half. He came in, he played great. I took him back to the airport. He lived in Bucks County at the time. And so when we got to Asia, Donald or Walter, I can't remember who, said, well, why don't we call Wayne Shorter? Okay. So I called Wayne Shorter and he said yes. For not, he could have said, yeah, for $100,000, but he didn't say that. It was more than a reasonable amount of money, and it was Wayne Shorter. So he came and we played him the track. He went out, he was at the Village, and he played once or twice. I would have taken either take. And he said, why don't you guys go get something to eat? I'll write something. So we did, he played, that was it. Wonderful guy. Wonderful.
I love the anecdotes. We have Lady Aptitude in the chat asking, does Gary have any concept of what Dr. Wu is about, or any Steely Dan song for that matter?
For all the songs that I sat and listened and worked with Donald and Walter on, I never once said, what does that mean? I just never did. If I didn't understand, I felt it.
I know Chad and I are like, yeah, we get that. It's about the feeling. And was there any song that was more, I think she asked earlier, was there any song that was more Donald versus Walter, or was it pretty
No. These
even?
guys these guys had a relationship, an unspoken, besides spoken, an unspoken relationship, inexplicable. Can't explain it, but they were, in the truest sense of the word, at least, musical soul brothers.
Aw.
They just understood each other. I mean, without much being said. And one night, I checked into a hotel in LA that I stayed at, often a boutique hotel called Le Rev.
Mm.
And when I checked in, I stayed there often. The guy said to me, Walter's upstairs. I went, oh, okay. So I went upstairs, I put my bags down, I relaxed, sat down, and I connected to Walter, who, as it turned out, I was in 316, he was in 318. There was this much wall space between us. I never saw him on the trip. We talked on the phone for a few hours one night,
Mm.
and his most meaningful words regarding what you want to know, he said to me, listen, you nor I will ever work with anyone that talented again.
Mm.
That's what I can say. And I can't say that I ever did, although Lauren Nero was right there.
That's beautiful. So, Walter, did you ever go to Hawaii? Because we were there a
Not with
bunch.
not with Walter. Went to Hawaii unrelated to stealing.
Okay. Um, sorry, Hawaii has actually been in the news a lot lately, and I've been thinking of it because we
And
were
I went to
there.
that. That's the one town. That's where I went when I went one
Mm,
time.
so, moment of love being sent to Lahaina right now. We had a lot of great memories on Maui with Walter, and I think Donald would go to an island, Kauai or something. But yeah, I was curious because I don't remember you there, but Walter did work there a lot.
He lived there.
Yeah, lived there, worked there.
Got married there.
I have some. That's actually where he went. I don't know if I have the history completely right, but from what I've heard, we have Gaucho. There's so much trauma and drama and things happening. Walter actually went to Hawaii, Maui, to go heal and take a break, and then that's when the Nightfly started happening. Do you remember that? Were you in contact with Walter at all, or?
No.
Hmm. Yep. Maui is a magical place, and we are so grateful for that. Dad actually went on the backside of Maui and recorded an hour of perfect ocean sound that I just recently put up on YouTube. So,
Yep. Your
yeah.
dad liked recording external noises.
Yeah, I think that was his moment of zen. We could never quite take vacations because he was always one of those guys that had a working vacation. Like we were on a vacation, but there was things that had to happen. Like we were filming or he was recording. Like it was never a relaxing vacation. So yeah, Dad was always recording, driving. He was always capturing the moment. I'm realizing now with all these home videos and stuff. And really quickly, somebody asked me about Wendell and where it's at now. At the moment, it's in my closet, and he's on his way to a museum. I don't want to announce where yet, but there's a few museums that have showed interest in housing Wendell. So we're super excited about that, and I'll let you know when I know. But yeah, Wendell needs to go to a museum. It's a super important part of digital audio history. Michael Kaplan asked in the chat, just to clarify the Wendell Nightfly thing. So did Jeff play this song on the kit and then sounds are replaced by Wendell? People have a hard time explaining.
No.
Right.
No. We had a track and a click track, and Jeffrey just played the keys, and he put the beat where he wanted, which we liked. But he played Wendell's keys.
Right. So he was literally hitting like enter on the computer, and then it would.
That's why it says drums, Jeff Becerra.
That's so funny. I love it. I love it. They actually named Wendell. Were you in the room when they named it? Were you there when Dad named it? He said they named it because they were getting in trouble with the drummers union for not having drummers on session days. So he
I
named
don't know anything about that story.
it.
How did he come up with Wendell? Is it an acronym or just?
He had two computers, Wendell and Gertrude.
He named his machines.
He named it Wendell and Gertrude.
And he said in an interview once that Wendell sounded like a jazz musician's name. I don't know.
He came down. I mean, he had already named it.
Aww. Personifying gear, making it human. I mean, those were his other children. To be fair, I carry Wendell around like my 70-pound brother. My dad loved that thing.
Yeah. It was an incredible piece of gear.
Groundbreaking. I mean, how was that shifting from analog to digital? I guess with my dad at the helm, it probably wasn't as complicated as maybe some other people had it. Like, how did you feel from that shift from analog to digital?
Again, Donald and I knew nothing about any of this technology. Nothing. So this was between your dad, Walter, and to some extent Denny. And I vaguely remember listening to these, conversations. Oh, the low end does this, and whatever they decided, we went with. I just didn't know enough about it, and continue not to know enough about it. We trusted your dad implicitly, and Walter was there with Denny. They were thorough. Let's just say nothing got done without a thorough conversation by guys who knew what they were talking about. And we never didn't like it. I mean, the only time your dad, Donald always wanted tracks. We didn't have enough tracks. So your dad, when we were doing Katie Lied, suggested that there might be a way to hook up two 16 tracks, and it would be 32 tracks. Well, there was nothing about anything that your dad said that Donald cared about other than he heard 32 tracks. And so we embarked on that experiment. That was brain taxing, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. Bleeding on the bleeding
edge. And that was your
technology.
dad. That was totally your dad's idea. So there's nothing to talk about. On the other hand, it's my favorite record and sounds great, notwithstanding the problem with DVX. That was probably your dad's decision. We would revisit again if we could. It was very difficult to mix, locking up two machines. And it was the first automated console. It was a Harrison console. So we were, for the first time, trying to figure out how to use automation and have this two machine thing going on, which was incredible. But it's a great record.
I actually have Jeffrey Fender. I have a Fen in the chat. Skunk's son. He says hi. He's loving it. He's asking if you have any fun skunk anecdotes. I guess Skunk was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and you called him to come out to LA. Was that how that worked, or how did that work?
Yes, I called. I met Jimmy Hodder because he was the drummer of a band I recorded one of the very first records I recorded was a band from Boston called the Bead Game that Jimmy Hodder was the drummer, and I really liked his style. I was a big fan of the band Traffic, and the drummer in that band, Jim Capaldi, had a style I just loved. And Jimmy Hodder played a bit like that, and I talked to Donald about it, and I knew Skunk from Boston,
Mm.
and it just worked out. There was no guarantee Donald and Walter would like them, meaning as musicians,
Hmm.
but it just worked out.
It worked out, and he's another brainiac. I mean, you got
Yeah.
Skunk, Denny, my dad, Walter. I mean, talk
I
about.
brought up the rear, and I had no problem with it at all.
I love it. You had your other strengths. You brought another dynamic that helped make it all happen. So
It was just, it worked out really well.
yeah, I mean, look, and you guys you trusted Dad. You let him take the lead on the technical stuff, and your albums are still being used to test audio systems.
It's true.
That's amazing.
No, listen, it's very shocking and rewarding at the same time. The fact that I might like something doesn't mean others will. But I went to an NAB show 4 years ago and walked in, and you just walk down the aisle, and guys are playing one album or another as, demonstrating their gear. Yeah, it's cool.
It's great. I love it. It's interesting. There won't ever be another Steely Dan, because not only was the craftsmanship there for Donald and his creative genius and Walter and the songs, there was also this technical part and the sonic quality that really do make it one of a kind. So we're so
your
grateful
dad
for
was
that.
just the top of the line at it for whatever combination of reasons. And it was a really terrific marriage between what your dad brought to what he could, Donald and Walter bringing what they could, and just the combination of people. It was more than we could have ever imagined when we started.
That's it. That's it. The keys to the universe. There you go. Energy in motion, when everything just creates this perfect storm. I love it. So, Chad, is there any other questions from the chat? I think we're about ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we've covered all the salient points.
Oh my God, I love it. So going. What?
What? No, go on.
You wanna keep?
No.
Let's hang out. I'm gonna do 500 more times, 90 more takes, 90 more hours of YouTube chats.
We didn't do that. I'll tell you though, when we would be doing vocals.
Yeah.
And if Donald would sing and I would say, one more. On occasion, he would get really, I don't know if the word is angry, but he would be upset enough to take his headphones, which you got pretty well known for, and throw them against the wall and say to me, "Don't fucking tell me one more when you know it's going to be 10.
Yes, that's a producer thing, though. That's a producer thing. They don't want the artist to get overwhelmed, so they're just like, one more.
So I did. I started to say, nah, we need 4 or 5 more. For a minute, I did that, and that stopped.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming, Gary. We have everybody in the chat super excited that they're thanking you for bringing us this incredible music and incredible tracks. And thank you for saving Gaucho. And yeah, everybody. It
was fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm gonna take us out with Laura Nero, a song that you said is one of your favorites. And stick around for a few minutes in the chat and I'll say goodbye and give you some updates. But that's it. Thank you, Chad, for organizing the questions for me. We had some great ones. Thank you to everybody for your questions.
Nice meeting you, Chad.
Nice meeting you too, Gary. Thanks so much.
And
Yep.
we'll see you on the Discord. So I'm going to take us out.
Okay.
Thanks again. Happy
Thanks,
Sunday.
everybody.
Bye.